The moment Patricia asked about my will, time seemed to stop. 67 candles flickered on my birthday cake, casting dancing shadows across the faces of my family gathered around the dining table. My daughter's question hung in the air like smoke. Casual yet calculated, spoken just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Dad, I've been meaning to ask, have you updated your will recently?" The room went silent. My son-in-law suddenly became very interested in his napkin. My grandchildren looked up from their phones. Even my sister Elaine, who never stops talking, pressed her lips together and waited for my answer. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I simply smiled and replied, "It's done." Then I blew out my candles in one decisive breath. Patricia's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "That's good to hear, Dad. We just want to make sure everything's in order." Her voice carried that familiar tone, the one she'd perfected over the last decade. Concern wrapped in practicality, tied with a ribbon of entitlement. My son Robert caught my eye from across the table, his expression unreadable. He'd flown in from Seattle for this, my first birthday since the heart attack that had sent me to the hospital 6 months ago. The heart attack that had, according to my children, changed everything. The heart attack that had somehow transformed me from the father who had raised them into a liability that needed managing. "Who wants cake?" My sister Elaine broke the tension, already cutting generous slices. She'd been my rock since Margaret passed 3 years ago. While my children had busy lives in distant cities, Elaine lived just 10 minutes away. She'd driven me to my doctor's appointments, sat with me through the long nights in the hospital, and never once mentioned my estate, or what would happen to my 4-bedroom colonial on 2 acres of prime real estate. As Elaine distributed cake, I thought about the manila folder sitting in my home office, the one containing the documents I'd signed just last week. The will that was indeed done, though not in the way Patricia was hoping. The cake tasted sweet on my tongue as I watched my family eat, unaware of what I'd set in motion. "Dad seems good, doesn't he?" Patricia stage whispered to Robert when she thought I couldn't hear. "Maybe a little thinner, but sharp as ever." "I'm sitting right here, Patricia," I said, my voice carrying across the table. "And my hearing is just fine." My grandchildren giggled, and for a moment Patricia had the grace to look embarrassed. "Sorry, Dad. It's just, we worry." "No need to worry," I said, setting my fork down. "I'm taking care of myself. And everything else." The everything else hung between us. My house, my savings, my investments. The fruits of 43 years teaching economics at the State University, where I'd written textbooks that still generated royalties. The careful investments that had grown steadily over decades. The inheritance from Margaret's parents that had allowed us to pay off our mortgage early and help both children through college without a penny of debt. After cake, we moved to the living room. My grandson Tyler showed me a new game on his phone. My granddaughter Zoe talked about her soccer team making it to the state finals. For a while it was almost like old times, before Margaret's death, before the heart attack, before my children started eyeing my assets like vultures circling a wounded animal. As the evening wound down, Patricia cornered me in the kitchen while I was rinsing dishes. "Dad, I've been looking into some wonderful retirement communities. There's one just 20 minutes from us in Connecticut. Beautiful apartments, excellent care, and you'd be close enough that we could visit all the time." "I'm not interested in a retirement community, Patricia. I placed a clean plate in the drying rack. I'm staying in my home." "But Dad, it's so much house for one person. And after your heart attack..." "My doctor says I'm recovering well. My heart is stronger every day. But what if something happens when you're alone? What if you fall, or..." "I'm not alone, Patricia. I have Elaine nearby. I have friends. I have my students from the continuing education classes I teach." Her lips thinned. "Teaching classes already? Don't you think that's pushing it?" I turned to face my daughter fully. At 42, she looked so much like Margaret. The same chestnut hair, the same determined set to her jaw. but where Margaret's eyes had always held warmth, Patricia's were cool, calculating. Patricia, I've spent my life teaching. It gives me purpose. The doctor says it's good for me to stay engaged. We just want what's best for you, Dad. No, I said quietly. You want what's easiest for you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her eyes widened. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've mentioned my will 3 times tonight. You've suggested I sell my home and move to a facility near you. But in the 6 months since my heart attack, you've visited exactly twice, including today. I have a demanding job, Dad. I have kids. I can't just drop everything whenever. I'm not asking you to drop anything. I'm asking you to stop pretending your concern is about my welfare rather than my assets. The kitchen fell silent except for the steady drip from the faucet. Patricia's face flushed. You've changed since Mom died, she finally said. You're harder. I've changed. I agreed. When you spend 47 years building a life with someone and then they're gone, it changes you. When you realize how short life truly is, it changes you. When you see clearly which people truly care about you and which are just waiting for their inheritance, it changes you most of all. Patricia flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's a terrible thing to say. It's the truth. And if there's one luxury I've earned at 67, it's the right to speak the truth. She crossed her arms, defensive. So what is the truth about your will, Dad, since you brought it up? I dried my hands on a dish towel. The truth is that it's done. Signed, witnessed, and filed with my attorney. Beyond that, it's none of your business until it needs to be. We're your children. We have a right to know. You have a right to nothing, I said, keeping my voice even. What I choose to do with what Margaret and I built is my decision alone. Robert appeared in the doorway, his face concerned. Everything okay in here? Just fine, I said, smiling at my son. Your sister and I were having a discussion about rights and entitlements. Very appropriate for a birthday, don't you think? Robert had the good sense to look uncomfortable. Unlike Patricia, he'd never directly asked about my will, or suggested I change my living situation. But he'd never contradicted his sister either, content to let her do the dirty work while he maintained plausible deniability. It's getting late, Robert said. The kids have school tomorrow. We should probably head out. The goodbyes were stiff, perfunctory. Patricia kissed my cheek with cool lips. I love you, Dad, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I love you too, I replied, because it was true. Despite everything, I loved my daughter. I just didn't like her very much at the moment. After they left, Elaine helped me tidy up the last of the party debris. You told them about the will? She asked, eyebrows raised. No, I said. I just told them it was done. They assumed that meant a traditional will dividing everything between them. Elaine snorted. They're in for a surprise. Eventually, I agreed. But not today. Today was about seeing clearly. And I had seen clearly. I'd seen the naked calculation in Patricia's eyes when she asked about my will at my birthday dinner. A calculated move designed to put me on the spot in front of family. I'd seen Robert's careful neutrality, unwilling to be the bad guy but equally unwilling to stand up for me. I'd seen how my grandchildren, absorbed in their devices, barely registered my presence except when cake was served. But I'd also seen Elaine's steadfast loyalty. I'd seen my neighbor Frank drop by before the party with a bottle of my favorite scotch and no agenda beyond friendship. I'd seen the handmade card from my continuing education students, signed by all 12 of them with genuine messages of appreciation. Later that night, after Elaine had gone home, I sat in my study with a small glass of Frank's scotch. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the manila folder containing my will. Not the old will that Patricia and Robert knew about, the one that simply split everything between them, but the new one I'd signed last week, the new will that left my house to be converted into a scholarship foundation for first-generation college students. The new will that directed most of my assets into a trust that would fund economically disadvantaged students at the university where I'd taught for 4 decades. The new will that set aside modest trusts for my grandchildren, accessible only after they completed college or vocational training. The new will that left Patricia and Robert each exactly $1. To make it clear, their omission was intentional and not an oversight. Was it petty? Perhaps. Was it deserved? Absolutely. I'd spent my life in service to others, teaching thousands of students, raising my children with every advantage, supporting Margaret through her own career. I'd given, and never once complained. But my heart attack 6 months ago had been a wake-up call, in more ways than one. It had shown me who would drop everything to be by my side: Elaine, Frank, several former students, and who would send flowers with a card saying they were too busy to visit Patricia and Robert. It had shown me that the legacy I wanted wasn't about passing wealth to children who already had successful careers and comfortable lives. It was about extending the same opportunities I'd had to young people who hadn't been born with the advantages my children took for granted. The heart attack had clarified everything. Life was too short to pretend. Too short to silence my disappointment in how my children had turned out, not in their professional accomplishments, which were admirable, but in their characters, which were not. Too short to leave my life's work to people who measured my worth by my assets rather than my love. I sipped my scotch and watched the moon rise through my study window. The same window where I'd graded papers late into the night while my children slept. The same window where Margaret and I had planned our future, dreaming of the family we would raise and the difference we would make. "I think I've finally figured it out, Margaret," I said aloud to the empty room. "What matters in the end?" The house creaked and settled around me, not empty, but full of memories. Full of purpose. I closed the folder and returned it to the drawer. The will was indeed done, and so was I. Done with guilt, done with manipulation, done with silent resentment. Tomorrow I would wake up, 67 years, and 1 day old. I would prepare my lecture for my continuing education class on economic philosophy. I would meet Frank for our weekly chess game. I would call Elaine and thank her for standing by me. I would live each day with intention and clarity, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I owned. As for Patricia and Robert, well, they had choices to make. They could continue as they were, counting an inheritance that would never come. Or they could remember who they had been before money clouded their vision, the children who had once looked at me with genuine love, who had valued my wisdom and sought my approval. I hoped they would choose the latter. But either way, I would sleep soundly tonight, secure in the knowledge that my legacy would serve a purpose greater than padding the already comfortable lives of 2 adults who had forgotten the most important lessons I'd tried to teach them. The will was done. And in a way, so was a chapter of my life. What came next would be written on my terms, with clarity, purpose, and the hard-won wisdom that only comes when you've seen both the best and worst of the people you love most. As I prepared for bed that night, I noticed my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked, lighter, as if speaking my truth to Patricia had lifted a weight I hadn't known I was carrying. The lines around my eyes seemed less pronounced, my shoulders straighter. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to my reflection. And for the first time in a long while, I truly meant it. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the distant sound of birds. For a moment, I simply lay there, feeling the solid beat of my heart in my chest. The heart that had nearly failed me 6 months ago. The heart that now seemed stronger than ever. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Elaine. "How are you feeling after yesterday?" "Lighter," I texted back. "Clearer." "Good," she replied. "Coming over with bagels in an hour. Need anything else?" I smiled at the screen. "Just you," I wrote. "And maybe some of that strawberry cream cheese." This was what love looked like, I realized. Not grand declarations or elaborate gifts. Just showing up. Bringing bagels. Asking what someone needs, and then providing it without ulterior motives. As I showered and dressed, I thought about the classes I would teach that day. About the students who would gather in the community center classroom. Retirees like myself, seeking knowledge for its own sake. Middle-aged folks exploring new interests. Even a few young people who couldn't afford traditional college but thirsted for education. These were the people who would benefit from my will. People who valued knowledge, who saw education as more than just a path to a bigger paycheck. People who reminded me why I'd become a teacher in the first place. By the time Elaine arrived with bagels, I was sitting on my front porch with 2 mugs of coffee, watching the neighborhood come to life. "You look better today," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "More like yourself." "I feel more like myself," I replied. Like I finally remembered who that is. We ate in companionable silence, enjoying the simple pleasure of good food and quiet company. After a while, Elaine spoke. "Patricia called me this morning." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "She wanted me to talk some sense into you. Said you were being difficult and paranoid about your money." I snorted. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that you're the most sensible person I know, and that if she's worried about your money, perhaps she should examine her own motivations." I reached over and squeezed my sister's hand. "Thank you." "For what? Telling the truth?" "For being the one person who's never wanted anything from me except my company." Elaine's eyes softened. "You're my brother, James. The only one I've got. What would I want except to keep you around as long as possible?" After Elaine left, I gathered my teaching materials and drove to the community center. The classroom was already half full when I arrived, familiar faces looking up with genuine smiles of welcome. "Professor Edwards!" called out Marianne, a retired nurse in her 70s. "We were just talking about your birthday. How was it?" "Illuminating," I replied with a smile. "Truly illuminating." As I arranged my notes on the podium, I looked out at these people who chose to spend their Tuesday mornings listening to an old professor talk about economic philosophy. These people who asked thoughtful questions, who challenged my assumptions, who thanked me sincerely after each class. These were my people. This was my community. And when I was gone, these were the kinds of students who would benefit from what Margaret and I had built. The thought filled me with a sense of rightness, of purpose. The will was done, and it was good. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation with my children or a permanent estrangement, I would face it with the same clarity I now felt. I cleared my throat and began my lecture, my voice strong and sure. Today we're discussing the ethics of inheritance and the question of what we truly owe to future generations. The class leaned forward, engaged and thoughtful. Outside, the sun continued its arc across the sky. And in my chest, my mended heart beat steadily on, carrying me forward into whatever remained of my life, a life that was, at last, truly my own. The call came the next morning, just as I was finishing breakfast. Patricia's name flashed on my phone screen, and I braced myself. After our confrontation at my birthday dinner, I wasn't sure what to expect. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Dad?" Her voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk about yesterday." "Good morning to you too, Patricia," I said, keeping my tone light. "I'm doing well, thanks for asking." A beat of silence, then a sigh. "I'm sorry." "Good morning, Dad. How are you feeling today?" "Better than I have in months, actually." "That's good." She sounded uncertain, as if my well-being wasn't part of her script. "Look, I've been thinking about what you said last night. About the will and everything." I carried my coffee to the porch, settling into my favorite wicker chair. "I'm listening. I want you to know that this isn't about money for me. Or for Robert. We're both doing fine financially. We just want to make sure you're taken care of." "I appreciate the concern," I said, watching a cardinal land on my bird feeder. "But as I told you yesterday, I am taking care of myself. Dad, please, don't be stubborn about this. After your heart attack—" "My heart attack made me realize something important, Patricia," I interrupted gently. "It made me realize that time is precious, and I don't want to spend what I have left fighting with my children over how I choose to live my life." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I'm not trying to fight with you." "Then stop pushing me about the will. Stop suggesting I sell my home and move somewhere convenient for you. Start treating me like your father instead of an inconvenient asset that needs managing. That's not fair, isn't it? I watched the cardinal fly away, a flash of red against the blue morning sky. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to discuss my health or my living situation or my finances, but just to tell me about your day or ask about mine. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. That's what I thought, I said softly. Patricia, I love you. You're my daughter. Nothing will ever change that. But love isn't the same as respect. And right now, you're not showing me much of the latter. Dad, I need to go. I have a doctor's appointment this morning, and then I'm meeting some former colleagues for lunch. This wasn't true, but I needed to end the conversation before it spiraled into another argument. I'll call you later this week, okay? After hanging up, I sat for a while, watching the neighborhood come to life. Mrs. Chen across the street watering her roses. The Donovan kids waiting for the school bus. Backpacks almost as big as they were. The rhythm of a normal Tuesday morning. Life continuing as it always had. Except nothing felt normal anymore. The heart attack had changed everything. Not just my physical health, but my perspective. Like a veil had been lifted, allowing me to see clearly what I'd been blind to for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Dad, Patricia's upset. Maybe we should all sit down and talk this weekend. I typed back, I'm teaching Saturday morning, but I'm free Sunday afternoon if you want to come by. His response came quickly. We'll be there. 2 p.m., okay? I sent a thumbs up emoji and set my phone down, so they wanted to talk. Both of them together. No doubt a united front. I wasn't sure if this was progress or just another strategy session, but I was willing to find out. The rest of the week passed in a comfortable routine. I taught my classes, met Frank for our chess game, he won as usual, and had dinner with Elaine on Friday night. I told her about the upcoming meeting with Patricia and Robert. Want me to be there? She asked, refilling my wine glass. I shook my head. I appreciate the offer, but no. This is something I need to handle myself. They're gonna try to gang up on you, you know. Probably, I agreed. But they're forgetting something important. What's that? I smiled. I taught negotiation strategies to business students for 15 years. I know all their tactics before they even use them. Elaine laughed, raising her glass in a toast. To the professor, still teaching lessons even when class isn't in session. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sunday arrived clear and warm, a perfect early autumn day. I spent the morning grading papers from my continuing education class, then made a simple lunch of soup and a sandwich. At 1:30, I put on a fresh shirt and tidied the living room, not because I was nervous, but because some habits die hard. Margaret had always insisted on a clean house for visitors, even family. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Patricia and Robert stood on my porch, both dressed casually but well. Patricia in slim black pants and a cream blouse, Robert in khakis and a blue button-down. No grandchildren in tow, I noticed. This was indeed going to be a strategy session. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let them enter. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? We're fine, Dad, Robert said, his tone carefully neutral. Thanks. We settled in the living room, them on the sofa, me in my armchair. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Patricia cleared her throat. Dad, we've been talking, and we want to apologize. This was not what I'd expected. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. You were right, she continued. We haven't been treating you with respect. We've been so focused on your health and other concerns that we forgot you're still the same intelligent, capable person you've always been. What your sister is trying to say, Robert added, is that we're sorry. We've been handling this all wrong. I studied their faces, looking for signs of insincerity, but their expressions seemed genuine. Patricia's eyes slightly damp, Robert's mouth set in a contrite line. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "Apology accepted." Patricia exhaled, visibly relieved. "So we can start fresh? Put all this behind us?" "That depends," I replied. "Does starting fresh mean you'll stop asking about my will and suggesting I sell my home?" The siblings exchanged a glance. "We just want what's best for you," Robert said carefully. "No," I corrected him. "You want what you think is best for me. There's a difference." "Dad, please." Patricia leaned forward. "Can't you see we're trying here?" "I see that you're trying," I acknowledged, "but I'm not sure what you're trying to do. Are you genuinely concerned about my welfare? Or are you worried that I might have changed my will in a way that doesn't benefit you?" Quote. Robert flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I gestured around the living room. "This house. The home where you both grew up. Where your mother and I built our lives. You've been suggesting I sell it since before the paint was dry in the hospital room where I recovered from my heart attack. Because it's too much for you to manage alone." Patricia protested. "Is it?" I challenged. "The lawn service comes every week. I have a cleaning service twice a month. I'm perfectly capable of cooking and taking care of myself day to day. So what exactly is too much for me?" They had no answer to that. "Let me be very clear," I continued, my voice calm but firm. "I have no intention of selling this house. I have no intention of moving to a retirement community or an apartment near either of you. This is my home, and I will remain here as long as I am physically and mentally able." "And the will?" Robert asked, then immediately looked as if he regretted the question. "The will is done." I repeated what I'd said at my birthday dinner. "That's all you need to know for now." Patricia opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. "A small victory." "Now," I said, softening my tone slightly, "if you truly want a fresh start, I'd be happy to have one, but it needs to be on terms that recognize my autonomy and dignity. I'm your father, not your ward." "Of course, Dad," Robert said quickly. "We understand." "Do you?" I looked from one to the other. "Because understanding means accepting my decisions, even when you disagree with them. It means calling me because you want to talk to me, not because you want something from me. It means remembering that I spent decades teaching young people how to think critically, and I haven't lost that ability just because I've gained a few gray hairs." Patricia nodded slowly. "We understand, really." "Good," I said, standing up. "Now would you like that coffee after all? And tell me about the kids. How are Tyler and Zoe doing?" The rest of the visit was almost normal. We talked about my grandchildren, about Robert's work, about Patricia's recent vacation to Bermuda. They didn't mention my living situation or my will again, and I allowed myself to hope that perhaps we'd turned a corner. After they left, I called Elaine. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "Better than expected," I admitted. They apologized, seemed sincere about it. "Do you believe them?" I considered the question. "I want to. Let's say I'm cautiously optimistic." Elaine sounded skeptical. "Well, I hope you're right." The next few weeks seemed to confirm my optimism. Patricia called twice just to chat. Robert sent photos of Tyler's soccer tournament. Neither mentioned my living situation or my financial arrangements. It felt like progress. Then came the call that changed everything again. It was a Tuesday afternoon, nearly a month after my birthday. I was in my study, preparing for the next day's class, when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this James Edwards?" A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes, this is he." "Mr. Edwards, this is Dr. Winters, from Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your sister, Elaine Edwards." My heart, the traitorous organ that had nearly failed me 6 months ago, seemed to stutter in my chest. "What's happened?" "Your sister was brought in about an hour ago. She collapsed at the grocery store. I'm afraid she's had a stroke. The world tilted sideways, then righted itself with painful clarity. Is she... How bad is it? She's stable, but her condition is serious. She's currently unconscious. Are you able to come to the hospital? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. One moment I was hanging up the phone. The next I was at the reception desk, asking for Elaine. They directed me to the 4th floor, the stroke unit. Dr. Winters met me in the hallway outside Elaine's room. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes and a direct manner I appreciated. Mr. Edwards, your sister has experienced a significant ischemic stroke affecting the left side of her brain. We've administered clot-busting medication, but it's too soon to know how effective it will be. What's her prognosis? My professor's voice, calm and analytical, even as my heart raced. It's too early to say with certainty. If the medication works as we hope, she could recover significantly, but there will likely be some impairment, possibly affecting speech, movement on her right side, and potentially cognitive function. I nodded, absorbing the information. Can I see her? Of course. Elaine lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Various monitors beeped and displayed numbers I didn't understand. A thin tube delivered oxygen to her nose. Her right hand lay limp on the white sheet. I moved to the bedside and gently took her left hand in mine. I'm here, Elaine, I said softly. I'm right here. Whether she heard me or not, I couldn't tell. Her face remained expressionless, her eyes closed. But I kept talking, telling her about my day, about the class 1 was preparing, about the cardinal that had returned to my bird feeder that morning. Words to fill the silence, to remind us both that life continued, even in this sterile room with its ominous machines. After an hour, a nurse suggested I go home and rest. We'll call you if there's any change, she promised. The next 24 hours are critical. I reluctantly agreed, but before leaving, I programmed my number into the phone by Elaine's bed and made sure the nursing staff had multiple ways to reach me. Back home, the house felt emptier than ever. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, unable to focus on anything. I should call the children, I thought. They should know about Elaine. But something held me back. The fragile peace we'd established over the past few weeks. Would it withstand this new crisis? Would they see Elaine's condition as just another reason why I shouldn't live alone? Another excuse to push their agenda? I was still debating when my phone rang again. The hospital. Mr. Edwards? Dr. Winters again. Your sister is showing signs of waking up. I thought you'd want to know. I'll be right there. This time, I remember every moment of the drive. The traffic light that seemed to stay red for an eternity. The ambulance that passed me with sirens blaring. Not for Elaine, I prayed silently. The parking spot that opened up just as I reached the hospital lot. When I entered Elaine's room, her eyes were open. Unfocused, confused, but open. Elaine, I said, moving to her side. It's James. I'm here. Her eyes, tracked to my voice, struggled to focus on my face. Her mouth worked, trying to form words, but nothing came out. Panic flashed across her features. It's okay, I soothed, taking her left hand again. Don't try to talk yet. You're in the hospital. You had a stroke, but you're getting excellent care. The panic in her eyes subsided slightly. She squeezed my hand weakly. Her left hand, I noted. Her right remained motionless on the sheet. Dr. Winters entered, checked the monitors, and smiled at us both. Good to see you awake, Ms. Edwards. How are you feeling? Elaine's mouth worked again, but still no words came. She's having trouble speaking, I said, stating the obvious. Dr. Winters nodded. That's not uncommon with a left brain stroke. The left hemisphere controls speech for most people. Ms. Edwards, can you squeeze the doctor's hand? She demonstrated with Elaine's left hand, which responded with a weak squeeze. Then she tried the right. Nothing. Can you wiggle your right toes for me? After a moment of concentration, Elaine's right toes moved slightly. That's excellent, Dr. Winters said encouragingly. The fact that you have some movement is a very good sign. Over the next hour, various tests were performed. Elaine could follow simple commands. She could nod or shake her head in response to yes/no questions. But speech remained elusive, and her right side was significantly weakened. What happens next? I asked Dr. Winters when we stepped outside Elaine's room. Once she's stable enough to be moved from the acute care unit, she'll need intensive rehabilitation, speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. It's a long road, but given what I'm seeing so far, I'm cautiously optimistic about her potential for recovery. And after rehab? Dr. Winters hesitated. That depends on how much function she regains. She may need assistance with daily activities for some time, possibly permanently. The implication hung in the air between us. Elaine, my independent, vibrant sister who had been my rock these past 3 years, might never be the same again, might never live alone again, might need care that I, at 67 with a heart condition, might not be able to provide. I understand, I said finally. Thank you for your honesty. That night, as I sat by Elaine's bedside watching her sleep, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. Dad? She sounded surprised. Is everything okay? It's pretty late. No, I said simply. Everything is not okay. Elaine's had a stroke. Oh my God. Patricia's tone shifted immediately to concern. Is she... How bad is it? Bad enough. Right side weakness, can't speak yet. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, but she has a long recovery ahead. Dad, I'm so sorry. I know how close you two are. Were, I corrected, then immediately regretted it. We are close. What can we do? Do you need us to come? I closed my eyes briefly. Not tonight. But tomorrow, if you could come to the hospital, I'd appreciate it. There are things we need to discuss. Of course. I'll call Robert, and we'll both be there. What time? Visiting hours start at 10. And Patricia? Yes, Dad? Thank you. After hanging up, I looked at my sister's sleeping face, the same face I'd known all my life. The little girl who had followed me everywhere, the teenager who had covered for me when I missed curfew, the woman who had stood beside me at Margaret's funeral, my only sibling, my most faithful ally. I'm going to take care of you, I promised her softly, just like you've always taken care of me. Elaine couldn't answer, but I like to think that somewhere in her dreams she heard me and believed. The next morning, Patricia and Robert arrived at the hospital together, both looking concerned and slightly apprehensive. I met them in the waiting area, not wanting to overwhelm Elaine with too many visitors at once. How is she? Robert asked immediately. About the same. Awake, alert, but still unable to speak and limited movement on her right side. Patricia touched my arm gently. How are you holding up, Dad? The question surprised me. It was the first time in months she'd expressed concern for me that felt genuine rather than calculated. I'm managing, I said honestly. It's been a shock. You said there were things we needed to discuss? Robert prompted. I nodded, gesturing for them to sit. I remained standing, needing the small advantage of height for what came next. Elaine's going to need extensive rehabilitation, I began, and after that, she'll likely need assistance for some time, possibly permanently. They nodded, waiting. I want her to come live with me when she's released from rehab. Dad. Patricia started, then stopped, clearly choosing her words carefully. That's very generous. But is it realistic? You're still recovering yourself and caregiving is incredibly demanding. I'm aware of that, I said, which is why I'm going to need help. Your help? They exchanged a glance. Of course we'll help, Robert said. Whatever you need. I'm going to hold you to that, I told them, because here's what I've decided. I'm not selling my house, but I am going to make some changes to it. I'm going to convert the downstairs study into a bedroom for Elaine, add grab bars in the bathrooms, widen the doorways if necessary. Whatever it takes to make the house accessible for her. That makes sense, Patricia said cautiously. I'm also going to hire home health aides to assist with her care. And I'll need you both to commit to regular visits, not just to help with Elaine, but to give me occasional breaks. They nodded, looking slightly relieved that I wasn't asking for more. And finally, I continued, I've decided to revise my will. Their expressions froze. Not in the way you're thinking, I added quickly. I'm setting up a trust specifically for Elaine's care. If anything happens to me before she's fully recovered, or if she needs permanent care, the trust will ensure she's provided for. Dad, that's... Robert began. The right thing to do. I finished for him. Elaine has been there for me through everything. I won't abandon her now." "No one's suggesting you should," Patricia said. "We're just concerned about you taking on too much." "That's why I'm asking for your help," I replied. "Not your permission, not your approval, just your help. Can I count on that?" They looked at each other again, then back to me. "Yes," they said in unison. "Good," I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Then let's go see your aunt. One at a time, though. We don't want to overwhelm her." As I watched Patricia sit beside Elaine's bed, speaking gently to her sister-in-law and holding her good hand, I felt a glimmer of hope, not just for Elaine's recovery but for my relationship with my children. Perhaps this crisis would remind us all what truly mattered. Not assets or inheritances, but the bonds between us. The love and support we owed each other not out of obligation, but out of the shared history that made us family. The will was indeed done, but the story of our family was still being written, and for the first time in a long while I was cautiously optimistic about how it might end. 6 weeks after Elaine's stroke, I stood in what had once been my study, now transformed into her bedroom. The walls had been repainted a soft sage green, her favorite color. The hospital bed we'd rented dominated the center of the room, but I'd arranged it to face the large window overlooking the garden. A television mounted on the wall, bookshelves filled with her favorite novels, family photos on every surface. It wasn't her home, but I'd done my best to make it feel like one. "What do you think?" I asked Patricia, who stood in the doorway surveying our handiwork. "Will she like it?" "She'll love it, Dad," Patricia said, genuine warmth in her voice. "You've thought of everything." The last 6 weeks had been a whirlwind of activity. Elaine had spent 2 weeks in the hospital, followed by 4 weeks in an intensive rehabilitation facility. Her progress had been steady but slow. She could now speak in short, halting sentences. She could stand with assistance and take a few steps using a walker. Her right hand could grasp large objects, though fine motor control remained elusive. Tomorrow she would come home, not to her house, but to mine, our house now. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "The home health aide will be here at 8 tomorrow morning," I said, checking my notes. "The physical therapist is scheduled for 11, and the speech therapist will come at 2. I've arranged for meals to be delivered for the first week, so we don't have to worry about cooking." Patricia touched my arm gently. "Dad, you've done an amazing job organizing all this. But are you sure you're not taking on too much? Mom's been gone for 3 years, and you've never been a caregiver before." "I'm not doing it alone," I reminded her. "I have the aides, the therapists, and I have you and Robert." "And you have your classes," she added. "I still don't understand how you're going to manage teaching and caring for Elaine." "I've reduced my schedule to just 2 mornings a week," I explained. "The university has been very understanding, and the aides will be here whenever I'm not." Patricia looked like she wanted to say more, but instead, she nodded. "Well, we'd better finish setting up. Robert's bringing the rest of Elaine's clothes this afternoon." As we worked, I reflected on the surprising evolution of my relationship with my children over the past 6 weeks. Patricia, who had once been so focused on my will and selling my house, had thrown herself into helping prepare for Elaine's homecoming. She'd coordinated with the medical equipment suppliers, researched the best home health agencies, and even painted the room herself. Robert had been equally supportive, handling the logistical aspects, arranging for a wheelchair ramp to be installed at the front entrance, finding a contractor to widen the bathroom doorway, accompanying me to countless meetings with insurance representatives and social workers. Neither of them had mentioned my will or suggested I move since the day Elaine had her stroke. It was as if that crisis had reset our priorities, reminding us all of what truly mattered. "I never thanked you properly," I said to Patricia as we arranged Elaine's toiletries in the bathroom. "For what?" She looked up, surprised. "For everything you've done these past weeks, for being here when I needed you." A flush of color touched her cheeks. "Dad, you don't need to thank me. She's my aunt. You're my father. This is what family does." "Yes," I agreed. "This is what family does. But we haven't been acting much like a family lately, have we? Not until this happened." Patricia was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I know I was pushing too hard about the will and the house. I'm sorry for that." "Why were you pushing so hard?" I asked, genuinely curious. You and Robert both have successful careers. You're not hurting for money, she sighed, sitting on the edge of the bathtub. It wasn't really about the money, Dad. It was about control, I guess. After Mom died, and then you had your heart attack, I felt like everything was spinning out of control. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too, so I tried to manage the situation. To fix it. By moving me closer to you, I nodded, understanding dawning. By making sure I was somewhere safe. Yes, she admitted. But I went about it all wrong. Instead of asking what you wanted, I tried to impose what I thought was best. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And the will? I prompted. She had the grace to look embarrassed. That was, I don't know, part anxiety about your health, part old-fashioned greed, I suppose. The house is worth a lot, and I kept thinking about what Robert and I could do with that money. Quote, "At least you're honest about it," I said, not unkindly. "Too little, too late," she said ruefully. "But watching you these past weeks, how you've thrown yourself into caring for Elaine, how you've reorganized your entire life to accommodate her needs, it's made me see you differently, not as an aging parent who needs managing, but as the same strong, capable father you've always been." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for that. And for your help. I couldn't have done all this without you and Robert." Speaking of Robert, she glanced at her watch. "He should be here soon with Elaine's clothes. I'll finish up in here while you check if anything else needs doing in the bedroom." By late afternoon, everything was ready. The room was prepared, the refrigerator stocked, the medication schedule posted on the kitchen wall. Robert had delivered the last of Elaine's personal items and headed home to his family. Patricia was brewing a pot of tea in the kitchen. I stood in the doorway of what had been my study and was now Elaine's room, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Loss, for the private space that had been mine for decades. Anticipation, for Elaine's arrival tomorrow. Uncertainty about whether I was truly up to the challenge of caregiving. And beneath it all, a quiet determination to make this work, to repay the sister who had been my rock when I needed one most. "Tea's ready," Patricia called, bringing 2 steaming mugs into the living room. "Thought you could use a break." We sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping our tea and watching the late afternoon sunlight slant through the windows. "Dad," Patricia said eventually, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "About the will?" I guessed, feeling a familiar tension return. "No, not about the will," she surprised me. "About you and Mom. How did you do it? 47 years of marriage, raising us, building your careers. How did you keep going through all the hard parts?" The question caught me off guard. Patricia had never asked about my marriage before, not in this reflective way. "We were a team," I said after a moment. "When one of us struggled, the other one stepped up. When your mother was in law school and studying for the bar exam, I took on more of the childcare and household responsibilities. When I was writing my first textbook and working crazy hours, she made sure our family life continued smoothly." "But there must have been conflicts," Patricia pressed. "Times when you disagreed about important decisions." "Of course," I smiled at the memory. "Your mother was the most stubborn woman I ever met. We had some legendary arguments. How did you resolve them?" "We talked. We listened. Sometimes we compromised. Sometimes one of us would concede, because we could see how important the issue was to the other. But mostly we remembered that we were on the same side, even when it didn't feel like it in the moment." Patricia nodded slowly. "I think that's what went wrong between us. You and me and Robert. We forgot we were on the same side." "Yes," I agreed. "We did forget that. But we're remembering now, aren't we?" "I think we are." I reached over and patted her hand. "Better late than never." She smiled. A genuine smile that reminded me so much of Margaret it made my heart ache. "I should get going. Tim is expecting me home for dinner, but I'll be back first thing tomorrow to help get Elaine settled." After Patricia left, I sat alone in the quiet house, thinking about tomorrow and all the tomorrows that would follow. My life was about to change dramatically. The peaceful retirement I'd envisioned, teaching my classes, writing my memoirs, perhaps traveling a bit, would have to be adjusted to accommodate Elaine's needs. But as I looked around at the home we'd prepared for her, I realized I wasn't resentful of these changes. In fact, I felt something I hadn't expected: purpose. A clear, meaningful purpose that extended beyond my own comfort and convenience. The next morning dawned bright and clear. The home health aide, a cheerful woman named Sophia, arrived promptly at 8 and helped me make the final preparations. Patricia came at 9, bringing fresh flowers for Elaine's room. Robert arrived at 10, having taken the day off work to help with the transition. At 11, the medical transport service pulled up in front of the house. And then, there she was, my sister, being wheeled up the ramp we'd installed, looking both smaller and stronger than when I'd last seen her at the rehabilitation facility. "Welcome home, Elaine," I said, taking the handles of her wheelchair from the transport assistant and guiding her inside myself. "Home?" she repeated, her voice still halting but clearer than it had been. "Thank you." We gave her a tour of the house, showing her all the modifications we'd made for her comfort and safety. She didn't say much. Speech was still difficult, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. When we reached her room, she gasped softly, "My books, my pictures." "We brought as much as we could from your house," I explained, "to make it feel more like home." She reached for my hand with her left one. Her right still lay mostly immobile in her lap. "It's perfect," she managed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. The physical therapist came and worked with Elaine for an hour. The speech therapist followed. Meals were served, medications administered. By evening, we had settled into a routine of sorts, though I knew it would take time for all of us to adjust to this new normal. After dinner, as Sophia helped Elaine prepare for bed, I sat with Patricia and Robert in the living room. "So," I said, "let's talk about the schedule for the next few weeks. I need to know I can count on both of you to help with Elaine's care." "Of course," Robert said immediately. "I can take every Thursday evening and Sunday afternoon. And I'm flexible if you need more." "I can do Tuesday and Friday evenings," Patricia offered. "And I can stay overnight on Fridays if you want to have a night off." I nodded, making notes in the scheduling book I'd started. "That's perfect. Between the two of you and the home health aides, I think we've got a good system in place." "What about your classes?" Patricia asked. "Are you sure you don't want one of us to be here while you're teaching?" "Sophia will be here," I assured her. "And I've arranged for my classes to be scheduled during times when Elaine has therapy anyway. It should work out fine." "Dad," Robert said hesitantly, "about the expenses for all this, the aides, the equipment, the modifications to the house." "It's taken care of," I said firmly. "I have good health insurance, and so does Elaine. What insurance doesn't cover, I can handle." "But it must be a significant financial burden," he persisted. "Patricia and I want to contribute." I looked at him in surprise. "You do?" "Of course we do," Patricia chimed in. "We've set up a joint account. We each put in $1,000 a month to help with Elaine's care. It's not enough to cover everything, we know that. But it's a start." I was momentarily speechless. This was the last thing I had expected. My children, who just weeks ago had been so focused on what they might inherit from me, now offering to contribute to Elaine's care. "That's very generous," I finally managed. "Thank you both." "It's the least we can do," Robert said simply. "You're right about what family does for each other." It's time we stepped up. Later that night, after Patricia and Robert had gone and Elaine was settled in her new room, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and reflected on the day's events. It hadn't been perfect. There had been moments of frustration and confusion as we all adjusted to the new arrangements. But overall, it had been a success. More importantly, it had been the beginning of something I hadn't dared hope for, a genuine reconciliation with my children, not based on what they might inherit from me someday, but on the shared commitment to caring for Elaine, and by extension for each other. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to our lives. Elaine made steady progress with her therapy, slow, incremental gains that accumulated day by day. Her speech improved, becoming more fluid, though still hesitant at times. She could walk short distances with her walker. Her right hand regained enough function to hold utensils and brush her hair. Patricia and Robert kept their word, showing up reliably for their scheduled times and often staying longer than required. They brought their children to visit, filling the house with the noise and energy of youth. They helped with Elaine's exercises, read to her, took her for short outings when the weather permitted. And somewhere along the way, something unexpected happened. The house that I had once fiercely defended as mine alone became ours. A shared space, a family home again. The will that had been such a point of contention faded into irrelevance as we focused on the present rather than some hypothetical future. One evening, about 3 months after Elaine had come to live with me, I found myself alone in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. I pulled out the manila folder containing my will, the one that had directed most of my assets to the Scholarship Foundation, and left Patricia and Robert just $1 each. I read through it carefully, then set it aside and took out a fresh legal pad. The next morning, I called my attorney. "James," she greeted me warmly. "It's been a while. How are you?" "I'm well, Caroline. Very well, in fact. But I need to make some changes to my will." "I see," she said carefully. "What kind of changes?" "Substantial ones. I'd like to set up a meeting as soon as possible." A week later, I sat in Caroline's office, explaining what I wanted. She listened attentively, making notes, asking clarifying questions when needed. "This is quite a departure from your previous instructions," she observed when I had finished. "May I ask what prompted the change?" "Life," I said simply. "Life. And a stroke. And discovering that people can surprise you if you give them the chance." Caroline smiled. "Well, these changes are certainly within your rights to make. I'll draft the new will and have it ready for you to sign next week." "Thank you." I stood to leave, then hesitated. "One more thing, Caroline. I'd like to arrange a family meeting here at your office once the new will is signed. My children, my sister, and myself." "Of course. Just let me know when you'd like to schedule it." The following week, I returned to Caroline's office and signed the new will. It wasn't a reversion to the old one that had simply split everything between Patricia and Robert. Instead, it was something more thoughtful, more intentional, a document that reflected the lessons of the past few months and my hopes for our family's future. A week after that, we gathered in Caroline's conference room. Myself, Elaine, using her walker and speaking slowly but clearly, Patricia, and Robert. Caroline sat at the head of the table, the sealed envelope containing my will in front of her. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I've asked you here because I want to be completely transparent about my estate planning. No more secrets, no more assumptions, no more using my will as a weapon or a bargaining chip." Patricia and Robert exchanged a glance but said nothing. Over the past few months, since Elaine's stroke, I've seen a side of both of you that I had begun to fear was lost. You've shown compassion, reliability, and genuine family loyalty. You've contributed not just financially, but with your time and energy. You've been the children Margaret and I raised you to be. "Dad," Robert started, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish, please. I want you to understand why I've made the decisions I have." I nodded to Caroline, who opened the envelope and began to summarize the contents of my will. The family home will be placed in a trust. As long as Elaine needs it as her residence, it will remain in the trust. After her death or recovery to the point where she can live independently again, the house will be sold, and the proceeds will be divided between the Scholarship Foundation I've established and Patricia and Robert in equal portions. Patricia's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent. My investments and savings will be similarly divided, half to the Scholarship Foundation, half to be split between my children. The foundation will provide financial support to first-generation college students, as was always my intention. The family heirlooms, Margaret's jewelry, the antique furniture, the art collection will be divided among family members according to this schedule. Caroline slid a document across the table. I've tried to be fair and thoughtful about who would most appreciate each item. Finally, I've established separate trusts for each of my grandchildren, to be used specifically for their education, not just college, but any form of education they choose to pursue. Trade school, art school, culinary institute, whatever path speaks to their hearts and minds. I looked around the table. Elaine was smiling, tears in her eyes. Patricia and Robert looked stunned. "This is my legacy," I continued. "Not just the material possessions and money, but the values they represent. Education, family loyalty, generosity to those less fortunate. These are the things Margaret and I tried to instill in you, and these are the things I hope you'll pass on to your children." "Dad," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know what to say. After how we behaved, the way we pressured you about the will, this is more than generous." "It's not about generosity," I corrected her gently. "It's about recognizing growth and change. 3 months ago, I had a very different will, one that left you both nothing but a symbolic dollar. I was angry and hurt by what I perceived as your greed and manipulation." Robert winced, but I continued. "But people can change. You both have shown me that. And if you can change, so can I. This new will reflects my belief in our family's capacity for growth, for reconciliation, for putting love above self-interest." "Thank you," Robert said simply, "not just for the inheritance, but for giving us a second chance." Elaine reached across the table with her good hand and squeezed mine. "Proud of you," she said, her halting speech filled with emotion. "Proud of all of you." As we left Caroline's office, walking slowly to accommodate Elaine's pace, I felt a sense of completion, of rightness. The will was done. Truly done this time, in a way that honored both my values and my love for my family. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Elaine, Patricia, Robert, and myself, I looked at each of their faces and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: peace. The tension that had underscored our interactions for so long had dissipated, replaced by a quiet harmony that felt both familiar and new. "To family," I said, raising my glass in a toast. "To second chances." "To second chances," they echoed, glasses clinking. And in that moment, I understood that the true inheritance I would leave behind wasn't the house or the money, or even the scholarship foundation. It was this: the lesson that it's never too late to heal old wounds, to rebuild broken bonds, to choose love over resentment. The will was done. But our family's story was just beginning a new chapter, one written not in legal documents or material possessions, but in the everyday acts of care and kindness that would sustain us through whatever challenges lay ahead. As the evening wound down and Patricia and Robert prepared to leave, my daughter hugged me tightly. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "Not for what you're leaving us, but for who you are." "I love you too," I replied, feeling the truth of it deep in my bones. Always have, always will. And that, in the end, was the only inheritance that truly mattered. 1 year had passed since my birthday, when Patricia had asked about my will, a year of profound changes, unexpected joys, and hard-earned wisdom. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the December snow dust the garden with white, and marveled at how different my life had become from what I had imagined at 67. Elaine had made remarkable progress. After 9 months of intensive therapy, she could walk with just a cane. Her speech was nearly back to normal, though she still struggled with complex sentences, and her right hand had regained enough dexterity to allow her to return to her beloved knitting. She still lived with me. We had both come to enjoy the companionship, but she no longer required constant care. The house had evolved around us, adapting to our needs just as we had adapted to our new circumstances. The downstairs bedroom remained Elaine's, but the hospital bed had been replaced with a regular one. The grab bars in the bathrooms, once so clinical, now seemed like natural extensions of the decor. What had begun as accommodations had become simply the way our home was. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. "James," Elaine called from the living room. "What time are they coming?" "Around 4, I answered, checking my watch. "Patricia's bringing the cake. Today was my 68th birthday, a milestone I had approached with trepidation last year, seeing it as a reminder of my mortality and diminishing independence. This year, I welcomed it as a celebration of life's continuing journey, of family reconciled, of purpose renewed. The doorbell rang at precisely 4 o'clock. I opened it to find Patricia, Tim, and their children on the porch, stomping snow from their boots. "Happy birthday, Dad!" Patricia hugged me warmly, then held out a large bakery box. "German chocolate, your favorite." "Thanks, sweetheart," I said, taking the cake and ushering them inside. "Where's Grandma Elaine?" Tyler asked, already shedding his coat and scanning the house for his great-aunt. "In the living room," I told him. "She's been looking forward to showing you her new puzzle." As Tyler and Zoe raced to the living room, Tim helped Patricia with the rest of the bags they'd brought. "Robert and Jenny should be here any minute," Patricia said. They were right behind us on the highway. Sure enough, the doorbell rang again a few minutes later. Robert entered with his wife and their teenage daughter Emma, all bearing gifts and covered in snowflakes. "Sorry we're late," Robert said, handing me a bottle of scotch with a red bow tied around it. "Traffic was worse than we expected." "You're right on time," I assured him, accepting the bottle with appreciation. It was the same brand Frank had brought me last year, a detail Robert had remembered. As everyone settled in the living room, exchanging news and admiring Elaine's latest knitting projects, I took a moment to observe the scene from the doorway. My family, once fractured by resentment and miscommunication, now gathered comfortably in the home they had once urged me to sell. My sister, who had faced mortality alongside me, now regaling my grandchildren with stories of our childhood. My children, who had once seen me primarily as an inheritance to be managed, now looking at me with genuine affection and respect. The transformation hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks along the way. Moments of old tensions resurfacing, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves. There had been difficult conversations about expectations, boundaries, and the painful history we had created together, but we had persevered, committed to building something better than what we had nearly lost. "Dad, come sit down," Patricia patted the spot beside her on the sofa. "Emma was just telling us about her college applications." I joined them, and Emma, usually shy about her accomplishments, enthusiastically described the university she was considering and her hopes to study environmental science. "I've been reading about the scholarship foundation you're establishing," she said. "I think it's amazing that you're helping first-generation students. My friend Lucia would qualify. Her parents immigrated from Guatemala and never had the chance for higher education." "That's exactly the kind of student the foundation is designed to help," I said, pleased that Emma understood the purpose behind my decision. Intelligence and drive should never be limited by financial circumstances. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The conversation flowed easily from there. Discussions about education, careers, the changing economy, interspersed with family jokes and updates on friends and neighbors. Frank arrived around 5, bringing a bottle of wine and his booming laugh. My former colleague Helen came shortly after, with her new husband Harold, a gentle man with kind eyes who had lost his wife around the same time Helen had lost her husband. As the evening progressed and dinner was served, a collaborative effort involving dishes contributed by every family member, I found myself marveling at how naturally we had all fallen into this new pattern of mutual support and genuine interest in each other's lives. After dinner, Patricia brought out the cake with its 68 candles, the flames creating a small inferno that made everyone laugh. "Make a wish, Dad," Robert said, his phone poised to capture the moment. I looked around at the circle of faces illuminated by candlelight. Family, friends, people who had stood by me through the darkest times and had helped create this brighter present, and realized I couldn't think of anything to wish for. In this moment, I had everything that mattered. I blew out the candles in 3 determined breaths, to applause and cheers. As cake was being distributed, Robert cleared his throat. "Dad, before we get too far into dessert, Patricia and I have something for you." Patricia nodded, reaching into her purse for an envelope which she handed to me. "This is from both of us." It's not exactly a traditional birthday gift. Curious, I opened the envelope to find legal documents, specifically, amendments to the scholarship foundation I had established. I looked up, puzzled. "We've each contributed to the foundation's endowment," Robert explained. It's now large enough to support 5 students annually instead of just 2. And we've committed to ongoing contributions, Patricia added. We want this to be a family legacy, not just yours alone. I was momentarily speechless, overcome by the significance of their gesture. This wasn't just a financial contribution. It was an embrace of the values I had tried to instill in them, a commitment to the vision that had once divided us. I don't know what to say, I finally managed. This means more to me than you can imagine. It's what Mom would have wanted, Patricia said softly. To see us working together like this. She would be proud of all of you, Elaine spoke up, her voice steady and clear. Margaret always knew her children would find their way back to what matters. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, Robert pulled me aside. Dad, there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. Ginny and I have been talking, and we'd like to invite you and Elaine to come stay with us for a couple of weeks this summer. We're renting a lake house in Maine. Plenty of room for everyone, and it's all accessible for Elaine. That sounds wonderful, I said, genuinely touched by the invitation. But are you sure you want 2 old folks cramping your vacation style? Robert laughed. Actually, we do. Emma's going to be heading to college soon, and I realize how quickly time passes. I don't want to look back and regret not spending enough time with my family. He paused. Besides, you're a pretty cool old folk, as old folks go. Quote, I'll take that as a compliment, I chuckled. And yes, we'd love to join you. As the last guests left and Patricia helped Elaine to her room, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my daughter. Thank you for this, I said, gesturing to the remnants of the party spread across the counters. It was a perfect birthday. You deserve it, Dad. She began gathering plates, falling into the cleanup routine we'd established over the past year. It's hard to believe how much has changed since last year's birthday. When you asked about my will, I reminded her with a gentle smile. She winced. Not my finest moment. Actually, I think it was necessary, I said, surprising myself with the realization. It forced us to confront the rift that had developed between us. If you hadn't pushed that button, we might have continued drifting apart indefinitely. Patricia considered this as she loaded the dishwasher. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes. When Elaine had her stroke, it was terrible. But it brought us all back together in a way I wouldn't have thought possible. Life's funny that way, I agreed. The challenges that seem most devastating often contain the seeds of unexpected growth. Is that the professor talking? She teased. Just an old man who's learned a few things by staying around long enough. I replied with a wink. After Patricia left, I checked on Elaine, who was already settled in bed with a book. Good birthday? She asked, setting her reading aside. The best, I confirmed, sitting on the edge of her bed. Did you see Robert and Patricia's gift? The foundation expansion? I did. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners in that familiar way, despite the lingering effects of the stroke. They've come around, haven't they? More than I ever expected. I admitted. Sometimes I wonder if I've been too hard on them, expecting too much. Nonsense. Elaine dismissed this with a wave of her good hand. You expected them to be the people you and Margaret raised them to be. And look, they are. They just needed a reminder. A pretty dramatic reminder, I pointed out. Heart attacks and strokes aren't exactly subtle nudges. Maybe that's what it takes sometimes. She shrugged. Big wake-up calls for big life lessons. I squeezed her hand. Well, I'm glad you're still here to share those lessons with me. Me too, little brother, she smiled. Me too. That night, I sat in my study. Not the original one that was now Elaine's room, but a new space I'd created in what had once been a rarely used guest bedroom. The walls were lined with my books, the desk positioned to catch the morning light. It was smaller than my previous study, but somehow more conducive to reflection. I opened my journal, a habit I'd started after the heart attack, and began to write. Today I turned 68. A year ago I saw this birthday as another step toward the end. Now I see it as simply another day in a life that continues to unfold in unexpected ways. Margaret used to say that the true measure of a life well lived wasn't in grand achievements or accumulated wealth, but in the quality of the connections we form with others. She was right, as she so often was. This past year has taught me that those connections can be broken and mended, weakened and strengthened, lost and found again. When Patricia asked about my will at last year's birthday, I saw it as evidence that our family had failed, that the values Margaret and I had tried to instill had been overtaken by materialism and self-interest. I responded with anger, then with a punitive will that would have perpetuated the very division. One was lamenting. Now I understand that families, like individuals, are works in progress. We make mistakes, we hurt each other, we misunderstand and miscommunicate, but we also have the capacity to grow, to learn, to forgive, and to begin again. The will that once seemed so important, the document I saw as my final statement on what mattered, has become simply one expression of my values among many. More important are the daily choices we all make. To call, just to check in, to show up when needed, to listen without judgment, to offer help without being asked. Elaine's stroke, devastating as it was, created the opportunity for such choices to be made by all of us. And in making them, we rediscovered the family we had nearly lost. As I look toward whatever time I have left, I no longer fear being a burden to my children or being valued only for what I can leave them. Instead, I look forward to continuing our journey together, not perfect, not without disagreements or difficulties, but fundamentally sound in the ways that matter most. The will is done, yes. But more importantly, so is the wall of resentment that had grown between us. In its place, we are building something new, a family defined not by obligation or inheritance, but by genuine care and shared purpose. I closed the journal and sat back in my chair, feeling the satisfying tiredness that comes from a day well spent. Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the familiar landscape into something new and beautiful. Inside, the house was quiet but not empty, filled with the echoes of today's celebration and the comfortable presence of Elaine sleeping down the hall. Tomorrow, I would wake up at 68 years and 1 day old. I would resume my regular schedule, teaching my classes, meeting with the foundation board, helping Elaine with her exercises. Life would continue its steady rhythm, punctuated by visits from my children and grandchildren, conversations with friends, and the small pleasures that had become more precious with time. But something fundamental had shifted since last year. I no longer saw myself as an aging man defending the remnants of his independence against well-meaning but misguided children. Instead, I was part of a family constellation that had reorganized itself around new realities while preserving its essential bonds. Margaret would have been pleased, I thought. She had always believed in our capacity to rise above our worst impulses and find our way back to love. She would have seen today's celebration not as a surprising turn of events, but as the natural outcome of the values we had lived by throughout our marriage. "You were right, my love," I whispered to the empty room. As usual. And somewhere, in whatever form consciousness might take beyond this life, I like to think she heard me and smiled. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the snow transformed into diamond-like crystals by the sunlight. I made coffee and took it to Elaine, who was already awake and working on her physical therapy exercises. "Happy day after your birthday," she greeted me. "How does 68 feel this morning?" "Remarkably similar to 67, I admitted with a smile. "Just with better company." As we shared breakfast, planning our day and discussing the previous night's celebration, the phone rang. It was Caroline, my attorney. "James, I hope I'm not calling too early. I just wanted to follow up on the foundation amendments your children submitted. Everything's in order, and I've filed the paperwork. The expanded scholarships can begin with the next academic year." "That's wonderful news, Caroline, thank you." "There's one more thing," she added. "I've been thinking about what you've accomplished with your family this past year. The reconciliation, the shared commitment to the foundation. It's quite remarkable." "It hasn't always been easy," I acknowledged. "Few things worth doing are," she replied. "But here's my thought. Would you consider speaking about your experience to some of my other clients? Many of them are struggling with similar family dynamics around estate planning. Your story might offer them a different perspective." I hadn't expected this. "You mean like a formal presentation?" "More like a conversation," Carolyn clarified. "A chance to share what you've learned about communicating with adult children, about inheritance, about finding common ground when money threatens to divide a family." I thought about it for a moment. Throughout my career as a professor, I had taught thousands of students about economic principles and financial strategies. But perhaps the most valuable lessons I had to share now had nothing to do with money management, and everything to do with family dynamics, emotional intelligence, and the courage to have difficult conversations. I'd be happy to do that, I told her. On one condition: Elaine comes too. She's been as much a part of this journey as I have. Perfect, Caroline sounded pleased. I'll set something up and get back to you with dates. After hanging up, I shared the conversation with Elaine. Look at you, she teased. Retired professor finds new audience for his wisdom. Our wisdom? I corrected her. I couldn't have navigated any of this without you. True, she agreed with mock solemnity. I am exceptionally wise. But you're not so bad yourself for a little brother. We laughed together, the easy laughter of siblings who had weathered many storms together and found themselves still standing, still connected, still finding joy in each other's company. Later that day, as I prepared for my afternoon class, I found myself reflecting on Caroline's request. What would I say to other families facing the complicated emotions that surround inheritance? What lessons had I learned that might help others avoid the painful detour our family had taken? These weren't revolutionary insights, I realized. They were simple truths that most of us know intellectually, but struggle to apply in our own complicated family dynamics. Perhaps that was the most valuable perspective I could offer. Not expertise, but experience. Not theory, but testimony to the possibility of transformation. As I gathered my teaching materials and prepared to leave, Patricia called. Dad, I forgot to mention last night. We're thinking about hosting a family reunion this summer, before the lake house trip. Would you be willing to help me go through the old family photos? I want to put together a slideshow. I'd love that, I told her. Come by this weekend, and we'll dive into the albums. Elaine will have stories I've probably forgotten. Perfect, she said. And Dad? I just wanted to say, I'm really glad we found our way back to each other. So am I, sweetheart, I replied, my throat tightening unexpectedly. So am I. As I drove to the university, I thought about the phrase Patricia had used, found our way back to each other. That was exactly what had happened. We hadn't created something new. We had rediscovered what had always been there, beneath the layers of misunderstanding and unmet expectations. The will that had once seemed so contentious had become simply a document among many, important for its practical purpose, but no longer the symbol of all that divided us. Instead, it had become one expression of a shared vision, a family legacy that would extend beyond any of our individual lives. And isn't that what we all hope for in the end? Not just to leave behind material assets or legal documents, but to know that what we valued most will continue, in the lives we touched, the lessons we shared, the love we gave and received. At my birthday the previous year, when Patricia had asked about my will and I had smiled and said, "It's done," I had thought I was declaring independence, drawing a line in the sand. Now I understood that what was truly done was a chapter in our family's story, a difficult chapter, but one that had set the stage for something better. The will was indeed done, thoughtfully crafted, legally binding, reflective of my values and wishes. But more importantly, the healing was well underway, the reconciliation continuing to unfold day by day, the family reknitting itself into something stronger than before. As I pulled into the university parking lot, I smiled at the symmetry of it all. I had spent my career teaching others about the principles of economics, but life had saved its most important lesson for my retirement years, that the true wealth of a life is measured not in dollars but in connections, not in possessions but in presence, not in what we accumulate but in what we share. It was a lesson worth learning, even at 68, especially at 68. And as I walked toward my classroom, where a group of eager adult students awaited, I felt profoundly grateful for the unexpected gift my family had given me. The chance to not just finish my story well, but to begin a new chapter that promised to be richer than I could have imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.